At 26, I had everything figured out, or at least that's what I liked to tell myself. A promising career as an investment manager at one of the top firms in the city, a sleek apartment I could finally afford without roommates, and enough savings to make my dream of homeownership a reality, without a mortgage, without debt, just the way I wanted it. I had built my life with careful precision, brick by brick, ensuring that nothing and no one could disrupt the foundation I had so painstakingly laid. And then, the phone call came. "Michelle, honey, are you coming for Thanksgiving this year?" Aunt Sarah's warm voice crackled through the receiver, instantly drawing a smile to my lips. If there was anyone in the world I owed my success to, it was her. She had been my rock, my safe harbor when my own family had made it clear that I was not a priority. Of course, I wouldn't miss it, I replied, already imagining her famous apple pie, the one that tasted like childhood and comfort. What I didn't expect, what I couldn't have possibly prepared for, was who else would be there. You see, I hadn't spoken to my parents or my older sister Jessica in 8 years, not since the day I left home, my high school diploma still warm in my hands and a college acceptance letter clutched to my chest. I had been foolish back then, believing that my hard work and academic achievements would finally earn me a place in their world. Instead, I learned the painful truth. "We can't pay for your college, Michelle," Mom had said, barely glancing up from her magazine. "Jessica's wedding is coming up, and we need all our savings for that." I still remembered how my heart had pounded, how my fingers had trembled. "But what about Grandma's money? She left it for my education. You promised." Dad shifted in his chair, looking anywhere but at me. "Things change, honey. Jessica's wedding is more important right now. You'll figure something out. More important." Just like everything else about Jessica had always been more important. The golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one for whom sacrifices were made without question. That night, I packed my bags and left. Not for a dorm room, not for a new adventure, but for the only place I knew I'd be wanted, Aunt Sarah's house. She had taken me in without hesitation, without conditions, and when she offered me the savings she had once set aside for her late son's education, I only accepted on the promise that I'd pay her back. Every cent, I did. It took years of part-time jobs, relentless studying, and sheer willpower, but I did it. And now, standing firmly on my own 2 feet, the last thing I wanted was to look back. But Thanksgiving had other plans for me. The moment I stepped into Aunt Sarah's house, balancing a store-bought pumpkin pie in my arms, my past came rushing back in full force. They were there, my parents, Jessica, and her 2 children, nieces I had never met, sitting comfortably in the living room, as if the last 8 years had never happened. Aunt Sarah rushed toward me, eyes filled with unspoken apology. I didn't know they were coming. They just showed up. I stood frozen, my grip tightening around the pie tin. Mom looked older, with more gray in her hair than I remembered. Dad had gained weight, and Jessica, she still had that effortless confidence, that quiet entitlement that had followed her all her life. I needed air. I'll be right back, I mumbled, stepping outside before the walls closed in on me. The cold November air bit at my skin, but I barely noticed. My hands trembled as I gripped the railing of the porch, my heart hammering against my ribs. Then, behind me, the sound of hesitant footsteps. "Michelle?" My mother's voice, soft, uncertain. I stiffened. "Can we talk?" 8 years of silence, and now, suddenly, she wanted to talk. I didn't turn around. "Why are you even here?" A pause, then a sigh. "Because we were wrong. Your father and we've spent years feeling guilty about what we did. We want to make things right." I let the words hang in the air, my breath coming in short, measured beats. Then, quieter. "Then why didn't you call?" My voice was sharper than I intended, but I didn't care. "Why didn't you write, email, anything?" Another pause, and then, the words that would haunt me for weeks. "Because we were ashamed." I turned my head just enough to see her face, tired, worn. Her hands trembled slightly as she wrapped her arms around herself, as if shielding from a cold much deeper than the autumn air. "We kept telling ourselves we'd reach out," she admitted, "but the longer we waited, the harder it became. And when we heard you'd be here, we knew this might be our only chance." I swallowed hard, my mind a storm of memories and unanswered questions. I had spent years resenting them, years building a life without them, and now they wanted back in. I didn't know if I had it in me to let them. "I need time to think," I finally said. "This is a lot." Mom nodded quickly, relief flickering across her face. Of course, take all the time you need. We'll be here. But even as she said it, I wasn't sure if I believed her, and deep down, I wasn't sure if I wanted to. I had barely stepped inside Aunt Sarah's house again, before the weight of my mother's words settled deep in my chest. We kept telling ourselves we'd reach out, but the longer we waited, the harder it became. For days after Thanksgiving, her voice played on repeat in my head. I tried to push it aside, to focus on work, on my routines, on the life I had built without them. But no matter how many late nights I spent at the office, no matter how many extra gym sessions I forced myself into, the memories kept creeping in. Then the messages started. First it was my father, short, to the point. Dad, hey Michelle, can we talk? A single text, no fluff, no unnecessary words, just 5 syllables that sat in my inbox for hours before I forced myself to ignore them. Then Jessica, I know things have been weird, but the kids keep asking about their Aunt Michelle. Maybe we could meet for coffee. A clever tactic, using the kids, nieces I had never met, to get me to lower my guard. I typed a response 3 times before deleting each version. And finally, my mother, Mom, Michelle, sweetheart, I was hoping you could come for dinner this Sunday. Just us. No pressure. We just want to talk. Talk. That word again. Despite every warning bell in my head, despite the years of betrayal and neglect, a part of me still wanted to believe they had changed. So I went. Sunday evening, I found myself standing outside my childhood home, a house that now looked smaller, more fragile than I remembered. The once pristine garden was overgrown, weeds pushing through the cracks in the pavement. The porch light flickered weakly, like it too was struggling to hold on. I hesitated before knocking. The door swung open almost immediately. Mom's face lit up in relief, as if she'd half expected me to run before she had the chance to pull me inside. You came, she breathed. I came. Inside, the house smelled the same, faint traces of cinnamon and lemon cleaner, an oddly comforting mix. The furniture was unchanged, but worn. The fabric on the living room couch stretched thin. I noticed the little details I had missed before, how the dining table wobbled slightly when Mom set down a dish, how the family photos on the wall were the same ones from before I left, as if time had frozen the day I walked out. Dinner started off civil, awkward, but civil. Mom had made my favorite childhood meal, lasagna, garlic bread, a simple salad. She kept sneaking glances at me, as if afraid I'd disappear before dessert. Dad cleared his throat. So, work's good? Yeah, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Busy but good, Jessica chimed in, her fork pushing around lettuce leaves. I heard Morton Associates has crazy bonuses. Must be nice. I stiffened. Mom gave her a look, but the damage was done. The moment she mentioned my salary, the energy shifted. Dad leaned back in his chair, rubbing his jaw. You know, things have been a little tight around here. Here it comes. Mom sighed dramatically. I lost my job a few months ago. The library was cutting positions and she placed a hand over mine, eyes watering just enough to be convincing. We've been struggling, Michelle. Jessica nodded along, her voice laced with forced casualness. And with 2 kids, it's been hard. I mean, daycare alone is insane, and their father is basically useless when it comes to child support. I set my fork down, suddenly losing my appetite. We were actually hoping, Mom continued carefully, that maybe you could help out a little. I inhaled slowly, willing myself to stay calm. How much are we talking? Mom's face brightened. Nothing crazy. Maybe $1,500 a month, just until we get back on our feet. I stared at her. They had already calculated a number. They had planned this before I even arrived. I should have known. Jessica smirked, sipping her wine. I mean, you make way more than that, right? My hands clenched under the table. I forced myself to keep my voice steady. I've worked really hard to get where I am. I've been saving for my own place. Dad waved a hand dismissively. And you'll still have plenty left over. This is family, Michelle. Families help each other. I glanced at Jessica, who was swirling her wine like we were at some expensive brunch. She had always been good at this, being the golden child, the one everyone bent over backwards for. Even now, after years of silence, she expected the same treatment. I swallowed hard. I need to think about it. Jessica rolled her eyes. What's there to think about? I turned to Mom, my voice quieter now. Is this why you wanted to see me? Because you need money? Mom's face fell, but she didn't deny it. That was all the answer I needed. I stood up, pushing my chair back. I should go. Mom grabbed my wrist, her grip surprisingly tight. "Michelle, please, don't be like this. We're trying to make things right." No, they weren't. They were trying to fix their financial problems. I had mistaken their guilt for love, their regret for true remorse. I carefully pulled my hand free. "I'll think about it," I said, knowing full well that I wouldn't. The drive home felt longer than it should have. My hands were stiff on the wheel, my chest tight. I had let them in, and just like before, they had shown me exactly who they were. I wouldn't make the same mistake again. It happened on a Wednesday. I was sitting in my office, reviewing a client's investment portfolio, when my phone buzzed. Another text from Jessica. "Jessica, hey, I need you to send me $3,000. It's urgent. No explanation, no pretense, just a demand." I stared at the message, something inside me finally snapping. For weeks, the requests had piled up. First, it was small things. A little extra for groceries, new shoes for the kids, a winter coat for Dad. Then, it escalated. Jessica's emergency car repair, Mom's overdue medical bill, Dad's leaking roof. I had covered it all, telling myself that maybe, just maybe, this time it was different. But it wasn't. I didn't reply. Instead, I went back to work, forcing myself to focus. Then, my office phone rang. "Michelle, it's Mrs. Peterson." My landlord's voice came through the receiver, hesitant. "I just wanted to check. Do you still need me to extend your lease? I heard from your mother that you're moving in with them." I froze. "What?" "She said you'd be leaving soon and that they were helping you transition back home." Blood pounded in my ears. I barely remembered the rest of the conversation, just that I reassured Mrs. Peterson that I had no plans of moving. When I hung up, my hands were shaking. They were planning to take everything. I grabbed my coat and keys, walking out of the office without a word. The entire drive to my parents' house was a blur of rage and disbelief. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my heart was pounding. I didn't bother knocking. The moment I stepped inside, they were all there. Mom, Dad, Jessica, sitting in the living room like nothing was wrong. Mom's face lit up in fake surprise. "Michelle, what a nice you told my landlord I was moving back in." Silence. Jessica scoffed, arms crossed. "Well, yeah, you basically live at work. We figured you didn't need that apartment anyway." I turned to Mom, my voice dangerously low. "You had no right." Mom sighed, standing up. "Sweetheart, we were just thinking practically. You're spending all this money on rent when you could be here, with family, helping us." "Helping," I repeated, bitterness dripping from the word. "Like I already have been? Like the thousands I've given you?" Jessica rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on, Michelle. It's not like you need it. You're doing fine." That was it. That was the moment I knew. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as a resource. My jaw clenched. "You weren't trying to make things right. You were trying to trap me." Dad, who had been silent this whole time, finally spoke. "Michelle, we're your family. Families take care of each other." I let out a hollow laugh. "Funny. You didn't feel that way when I was 18, alone, and needed you the most." A tense silence filled the room. Then Mom sighed, exasperated. "Look, Michelle, we just need a little more help, just until we get stable again. You've been doing so well and—" "No," Mom blinked. "What?" "No," I repeated, my voice steel. "No more money, no more favors, no more pretending we're a real family. I'm done." Jessica scoffed. "Oh, please, you need us." I laughed, shaking my head. "No, Jessica, that's where you're wrong. You need me." I pulled out my phone, tapping through my banking app. With a single click, I canceled the monthly transfer. Another click. Jessica's Europe trip was officially refunded. Her face paled. "You canceled it?" I smiled coldly. "I did. And you know what? I think I'll go to Europe instead." Jessica shot to her feet, her voice rising. "You selfish little—" Mom grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. "You can't do this to us." I yanked my arm free. "Watch me." I turned and walked toward the door. "Michelle, don't you dare!" Mom's voice cracked. I paused at the threshold, looking back at them one last time. They weren't my family. Not really. Family didn't use you. Family didn't lie to you. And I was done pretending. Without another word, I stepped outside, shutting the door behind me. I didn't cry. I didn't hesitate. For the first time in years, I felt free. The fallout came faster than I expected. The moment I shut that door behind me, I knew there was no turning back. I knew that whatever twisted version of family I had tolerated up until now had officially shattered. The first call came that night. Mom. I didn't pick up. Then Dad. Ignored. Then Jessica, who left a voicemail laced with venom. You think you're so much better than us? You're nothing without this family. Don't come crawling back when you realize that. I laughed bitterly, deleting the message before she even finished speaking. The next morning, the text messages poured in. Mom, Michelle, let's talk. We can fix this. Dad, you need to grow up and stop acting selfish. We're family. Jessica, you ruined everything. I hope you're happy. I didn't reply. Then, the final blow. Aunt Sarah called. Her voice was hesitant, careful. Michelle, sweetheart, your mom called me. She's upset. She said you cut them off completely? I exhaled, pressing my fingers against my temple. Did she also tell you they tried to manipulate my landlord into kicking me out? That they've been calling me their personal ATM? Silence. Then, a quiet sigh. I suspected as much. I sat down on my bed, rubbing my eyes. Aunt Sarah, I know you want me to find peace with them, but I can't. Not anymore. She didn't try to argue. She never did. Are you okay? I swallowed hard, surprised by the sting behind my eyes. I don't know. Another pause. Then gently, I'm proud of you, Michelle. I know it hurts, but you did the right thing. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. At first, I expected them to fight harder, to keep calling, to try new tactics. But after a week of nothing, I realized the truth. They weren't reaching out to mend things. They were reaching out because they had lost their financial safety net. Without me, there was no free money, no more European vacations, no new appliances, no emergency cash for unexpected bills. When they realized I wouldn't bend, they gave up. The absence of their noise should have been comforting, but instead, it left a hollow ache in its place. Even knowing what they had done, I still felt the loss, not of them, but of the idea of them, of the family I had once wished they could be. I threw myself into work. I finalized the purchase of my new apartment, moved my things out of Aunt Sarah's garage and into my sleek, modern space with its open-concept kitchen and sprawling city views. For the first time in my life, I had something that was mine. I furnished the space carefully, choosing pieces that felt like me, not what I thought I should have, not what my family would approve of, just me. When I hung the last piece of artwork on the wall, I stepped back and smiled. It was perfect. 2 months passed before my phone lit up with a familiar name. Mom. I almost ignored it. Almost. But something in me needed closure. I answered. Her voice was stiff. Michelle. I waited. She sighed. I suppose you're expecting an apology. My stomach turned, but I kept my voice steady. Only if it's real. A long silence. Then, quietly, we miss you. I closed my eyes. No, you miss what I did for you. Jessica. I don't care what Jessica is saying, I cut in. She never saw me as anything but a wallet. Neither did you. Mom exhaled sharply. We're struggling, Michelle. Things have been hard. For a moment, I almost caved. Then I thought about the years of being second best, of them discarding me when I wasn't convenient, of Jessica sneering at my success while expecting to benefit from it. I hope you figure it out, I said, meaning it. But I won't be part of it. She inhaled sharply. Michelle, I have to go. And for the first time in my life, I hung up first. That weekend, Aunt Sarah came over for dinner. I made her favorite lasagna. We opened a bottle of wine, sat on my balcony, and watched the city lights come alive. She clinked her glass against mine. How does it feel? I thought about it. The peace, the freedom, the weight that had finally lifted. I smiled. It feels like a new beginning. She squeezed my hand, eyes warm. Good. You deserve it. I looked out at the skyline, letting the moment settle deep in my bones. Family wasn't about blood. It was about who showed up, and for the first time, I had chosen myself. The first morning in my new apartment, I woke up to the sound of quiet. No messages demanding money, no guilt-laced calls, no family obligations dragging me into a cycle I had spent years trying to escape. Just stillness, just peace. I stretched, letting my body sink into the plush warmth of my bed. Sunlight streamed through the massive windows, casting golden patterns against my new hardwood floors. The city below hummed with life, but up here, in my own space, everything felt calm. I had spent years chasing approval, sacrificing pieces of myself in the hope that one day, my family would finally see me as more than just a backup plan. But now, I didn't need them to. I had me. The first thing I did was throw a housewarming party, not for show, not for appearances, but for the people who had truly been there for me. Aunt Sarah arrived first, carrying a ridiculously large basket filled with everything from homemade cookies to lavender-scented candles. You went overboard, I laughed, accepting the gift. That's what family does, she said simply, giving me a knowing smile. The next to arrive were a few colleagues from work, people I had always kept at a polite distance, too afraid to let them in, too conditioned to believe that I had to do everything alone. But tonight, as laughter echoed through my new space, I realized how much I had been missing. I wasn't alone. I had chosen family, in all its unexpected forms. The messages from my parents and Jessica eventually stopped. At first, they came in waves, accusations, guilt trips, then desperate bargaining, then silence. I didn't know if they ever truly regretted what they had done, or if they'd just accepted that I was no longer their safety net. But I did know that I no longer cared. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't waiting for an apology that would never come. I had simply let go, and in doing so, I had finally freed myself. 3 months later, I booked a ticket to Europe. Not for Jessica, not out of obligation. For me, I spent 2 weeks wandering the streets of Paris, sipping coffee in hidden cafes, standing on the edge of the Seine, watching the world move around me. I visited Rome, walking through ancient ruins, feeling small in the best way possible. I made friends with strangers, danced in dimly lit bars, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was running. I felt like I was living. One night, sitting on a rooftop terrace in Barcelona, I sent a single message to Aunt Sarah. Me, thank you for everything. Her reply came instantly. Aunt Sarah, I always knew you'd find your way, sweetheart. Standing on that terrace, looking out at the shimmering city, I finally understood. Family wasn't about blood. It wasn't about obligation. It was about who showed up. It was about the people who loved you for who you were, not for what you could give. And it was about loving yourself enough to walk away from those who didn't. For years I had been afraid that letting go of my family would leave me empty. But now, I realized it had made room for something better, something real, a life of my own. And as I raised my glass to the sky, to the city, to myself, I knew this was only the beginning. Story 2. My 28th birthday was supposed to be, well, not special exactly, but at least not a complete disaster. I'd even bought a cake, a fancy one, from that bakery downtown. Maybe, just maybe, this year would be different. See, I lived with my parents, Susan and Mark, and my younger brother Tom, in this cramped, slightly off-smelling house. I chipped in for a huge chunk of the bills, bought most of the groceries, even fixed the leaky faucet in the bathroom last month. You'd think I'd get a little appreciation, right? Wrong. My mom's favorite line was, "When are you going to get a real job, AmITheA?" Like my marketing assistant gig was some kind of joke. Apparently, if I wasn't a doctor or a lawyer, it didn't count. And Tom, he was 26, perpetually glued to his phone, and treated me like I was something he'd scraped off his shoe. He had more Instagram followers, so obviously, he was king. So yeah, my birthday. I talked to my parents a few days before. Hey, maybe we could do something this weekend. Hang out, have some cake? I tried to sound casual, not like I was desperately hoping they'd actually remember. We'll see, AmITheA. We might have plans. Plans. On my birthday, the day itself started okay. Happy birthdays at work, a new outfit. I even let myself hope for a little surprise when I got home. But as I pulled into the driveway, my stomach dropped. My stuff, boxes, bags, clothes, books, everything, just piled on the front lawn like trash. My parents and Tom were standing on the porch, watching me. It was like some twisted reality TV show. What's going on? My voice came out shaky. My mom, her face an emotionless mask, said, AmITheA, it's time for you to move out. You're not welcome here anymore. Move out. On my birthday? This had to be some kind of sick joke. I looked at my dad, hoping he'd say something, anything, to tell me this wasn't real, but he just stared at the ground. Then Tom, with that stupid smirk he always wore, said, maybe you should have thought about that before being such a burden all these years. A burden? I was the burden. But it's my birthday, I said, my voice cracking. Where am I supposed to go? That's your problem, my mom snapped. We need the space. Frankly, you need to grow up. And that was it. No explanation, no second chances. Just over. I loaded my stuff into my car, my hands shaking. It felt like a bad dream. I wanted to scream, to cry, to ask them how they could be so cruel. But I didn't. I just kept moving, one box after another, trying to hold myself together. As I finished packing, I turned to them one last time. Why today? Why on my birthday? My mom didn't even blink. Consider it our gift to you. Independence. And just like that, I was gone. On what should have been a day of celebration, I found myself driving away from the only home I'd ever known, with no idea where I was going. The cheapest motel I could find had a flickering neon sign and a distinct smell of stale cigarettes. Not exactly the birthday celebration I'd envisioned. I spent the night staring at the water-stained ceiling, trying to understand how the people who were supposed to love me could be so heartless, but there was no understanding it. So, the next day, I did what I always did. I threw myself into work. What else was there? I had bills to pay, and now I needed a place to live. My boss, Hannah, noticed something was off. I was practically living at the office, hunched over my laptop, churning out work like a machine. One evening, she found me there late, the office almost deserted. "Amelia, can we talk?" I looked up, probably a complete mess. She gave me this concerned look. "You're going to work yourself into the ground at this rate. What's going on?" And I just broke. I told her everything. The eviction, the motel, the boxes piled in the corner of the room. Hannah listened patiently. When I finished, she sighed. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I shrugged, embarrassed. "You're my boss, not my therapist." She smiled. "Look, Amelia, I have a spare room. It's not much, but you're welcome to stay there until you get things sorted." I was stunned. "Are you serious?" "Of course. Don't worry about it. Just promise me you'll take care of yourself." Just like that, I had a lifeline. It wasn't home, but it was a roof over my head and a chance to breathe. I moved in the next day. Hannah's spare room was small, but it was clean, warm, and quiet. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. The first night there, I sat on the bed, trying to process everything. There was still this ache in my chest, this feeling of disbelief, but I couldn't let myself fall apart. I had to keep moving forward, so I worked even harder. Hannah wasn't kidding about pushing me, but I welcomed the distraction. I took on extra freelance gigs, anything to build up my savings. It wasn't easy. There were nights I stayed up until dawn, fueled by coffee and sheer determination, the silence of the room punctuated by the click of my keyboard. My best friend, Liam, was a rock during those months. We'd been close since college, and even though we lived in different cities now, we talked all the time. When I told him what happened, he was furious. "I can't believe they did that to you," he said. "You deserve better." He was right, but it still hurt. Liam, ever the optimist, tried to lighten the mood. "You know what would really piss them off?" he said with a laugh. "You becoming wildly successful and rubbing it in their faces." We both laughed, but the idea stuck with me. Not that I wanted revenge exactly. Okay, maybe a little, but mostly, I just wanted to prove to myself that I didn't need them. I could make it on my own, and that became my mission. Work harder, save more, and eventually get out of Hannah's spare room and into a place of my own. Slowly, things started to look up. My designs were getting noticed. I was landing bigger clients, and the money was actually starting to come in. It felt like every late night, every sacrifice, was starting to pay off. One day, Hannah called me into her office. She had this huge grin on her face. "Amelia," she said, "how does lead designer sound to you?" With a raise, of course. I was speechless. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious," she said, still grinning. "You've earned it. You've been doing incredible work, and it's time to recognize that. Lead designer. Me. It felt like all the hard work, all the sleepless nights, all the stress. It was finally worth it." "Thank you," I managed to say, still in shock. "Don't thank me yet," she said with a wink. "You're going to have a lot more responsibility now." I didn't care. I was ready for it. This was what I'd been working towards. With the promotion and the extra freelance work, I was finally in a position to start thinking about my next move. Literally, I wasn't going to stay in Hannah's spare room forever. I could actually start looking for my own place. But it wasn't just about the money or the job title. It was about finally feeling like I was in control of my life again. For so long, I'd felt stuck. Stuck in that house. Stuck with my family's expectations. Stuck in their judgment. But now I was free. I was making my own decisions, building my own life, and no one could take that away from me. I was finally moving forward, and it felt damn good. A few weeks after my promotion, I was in the zone. Work was going great. I was saving money, and I'd even started browsing apartment listings. Life was finally on track. Then, of course, the universe decided to throw a curveball. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I was knee-deep in a project when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen and saw the name I least expected. Tom, my brother. The last person I wanted to hear from. I stared at the phone, debating whether to answer. I hadn't heard from him, or my parents, since they kicked me out. And honestly, I hadn't missed them, but curiosity, and maybe a flicker of that old, lingering hope, got the better of me. "Hello?" I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Amelia, it's me, Tom." His voice was surprisingly subdued, no trace of his usual arrogance. "I know," I said, a little annoyed. "What do you want?" A long pause. I thought he'd hung up, but then he spoke again, his voice hesitant. I need help, Tom." Needing help? From me? The same brother who'd watched while my stuff was thrown onto the lawn. "Yeah, right. I don't know what to tell you," I said, feeling anger rise. "You made it pretty clear. I'm not part of the family anymore." He sighed. "Look, I know things have been rough, but this isn't about that. It's about Dad. He lost his job and Mom's spending is out of control. I can't afford school anymore." There it was, the real reason for the call. It wasn't about me, or making amends, or even caring about what happened. It was about money. It was always about money. "So, let me get this straight," I said, my voice sharp. "You're calling me now after months of silence because you need money?" "It's not just about the money," Tom said quickly. "We're in a bad spot, Amelia. You know how Mom is. She's been spending like crazy, and Dad, well, he's not doing great without a job. I don't know what to do." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "That sounds like a you problem, Tom, not mine." "Come on, Amelia. We're family," he pleaded, and I could hear the desperation in his voice. It was the first time in years he'd sounded vulnerable, but I wasn't falling for it. "Family?" I scoffed. "You guys threw me out on my birthday. Family doesn't do that." He didn't have an answer, just a long, heavy silence, and that silence told me everything I needed to know. "I'm done being your backup plan," I said, my voice firm. "You and Mom and Dad made it pretty clear where I stand. Don't call me again." And before he could respond, I hung up. My hand was shaking as I set the phone down. I felt this strange mix of anger, sadness, and relief. It felt good to stand up for myself, to finally say no, but it also sucked that it had come to this. I threw myself back into work, trying to push the thoughts of my family away, but they lingered, like a persistent ache. That night, I lay in bed, replaying the conversation over and over. I kept thinking about what I could have said, what I should have said. I wanted to believe that maybe, deep down, they were sorry, but I knew better. They weren't calling because they missed me, or because they regretted what they did. They were calling because they needed something, and I wasn't going to let them use me again. The next morning, I woke up feeling more determined than ever. It was time to focus on me, on building my life, my career, my future. I couldn't keep looking back, couldn't keep wondering if things could have been different. They weren't, and that was the reality. I made a promise to myself that day. I wasn't going to let my family drag me down anymore. I'd been through enough, and I was finally starting to build something good for myself. I wasn't about to let them ruin that. Sure, part of me still felt guilty for cutting them off, for not helping when they were clearly struggling. But then I reminded myself, where were they when I was struggling? Where were they when I needed help? I didn't owe them anything, so I kept going. I worked hard, saved my money, and kept my focus on the future. And every time I started to feel that old guilt creeping in, I reminded myself of that phone call. They made their bed, and now they had to lie in it. I wasn't going to be their safety net anymore, and honestly, it felt good to finally be free.